I'm Eddie Lenihan, and I have been collecting stories from the old people for many, many years. And many of those old people would tell you that the one night of the year that it's maybe better to stay at home, to keep away from any dark place, was Ia Hauna, Halloween night. And why? Because that was the night that our world and the next world were nearest to each other. If you want to put it this way, the veil between the other world and our world was at its thinnest. And if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time on that night, well then, you mightn't come back. Why would you go out on that night? Now, you'd ask, who beside yourself might be out on that night from the other world? It might be the dead, but it might also be the good people, the fairies, Nadina Ushle. And if you met the dead, well, maybe they were only looking for help. When the dead come back, it's usually that they're in trouble. A prayer or a mass might solve that. But if you met the fairies on Halloween, when they're changing their abode from one fort to another, you'd be better off not to meet them, to get in their way. Now, I knew a man, he's dead now, God rest the man, but he was mad for playing cards. Mad for playing cards. And you couldn't keep him in. You could not keep him in. No matter what night of the year it would be, he'd play cards on Good Friday. But he told me he was out on this Halloween night. And he was coming home. He had won a few shillings. And all he'd need, of course, was the price of cigarettes for the next couple of days. And they sell cigarettes that time singly, not by the box at all, because people rarely had the price of a box of cigarettes, fags, they call them. And he was very well pleased with himself. But he was coming near the house, his own house. And of course, people at that time, they'd take shortcuts across the fields. It was a dry night, and this was a dry night, a moonlit night. And he was just about to cross the field by a stile, little stone stiles across the field from one field to another. But he was just about to cross the stile. He could see his house from him, and the light was on. Now, as he was about to cross the stile, whatever look he gave, he saw the movement. And he saw this crowd of people beginning to cross from that corner of the field. And now he stopped. Who would be out at this time of the night? He said to himself, and all right. It could be anybody like himself. So he said he'd let them pass. And see whether they salute him or greet him. Maybe they were coming from another card play or a music session or what, he didn't know. So he did. Stood his ground, said nothing, and on and on and on. Now, I had a thought he didn't know them at all. He didn't know one of them. And he should if they were people of the place. And they headed diagonally across the field in front of him. Ordinary sized people. People like you and me. And out a stile at the other side, the other corner of the field. Never said a word, never looked at him, no nothing. My God, he went on. Very mysterious. Because you know yourself, Irish people are friendly people and they'd normally salute you. But anyway, he went, and when he came to his own little boreen, there was a gate that little passageway up to the house. And he went, and he was, of course, very anxious to tell this to his sister. His father and mother were dead. There was only three of them living in the house, himself and his brother and his sister. But when he went in anyway, there was his sister inside, and her head down, hands like that, she crying. And naturally he asked her, he said to her, "What's wrong with you?" "What?" And she says to him, our brother is dead, our brother is dead." She had got the news about a half an hour before that her brother had been killed about a mile and a half away. A horse had jumped out over a ditch and struck him in the head. Its hooves killed him. And who were the men? Who were the men passing in the field before? But the strange part of it was that just out of the corner where they were going, there was a fort, a fairy fort. Were they heading towards that? He had no answer. He had no answer whatsoever. He didn't know. But was it an omen of something to come? He had no answer for me. But it was Halloween night. Should the brother have been out? Should he have been out? Obviously not, because the misfortune fell on them. So like I said at the start, the old people always said that you should stay at home on that night just for your own good. But he remembered that all his life, and he was an old man when he told me that story. And I went and had a look at the field myself, because I like to check these things afterwards just to see. And it was as he said. The field was there, nothing had changed. The little stile that he crossed, and the other stile going out the other corner, and the fort beyond. There's such a thing as luck. There's no doubt about it. Anybody who does the lottery on a regular basis knows that. Anybody who buys old scratch cards knows that. On 1 week, you'll get something on a regular basis out of them. On another week, you could buy €100 worth of them and you'll get nothing. The same is true of cards. You can break yourself playing cards, and another time you'll make money. There's no knowing with luck. Lady Luck, she's called. Strange thing. And there's a story about that, and about Iha Hauna. There was this man in County Kerry, in Brusna, where I come from, and he was mad for the cards. I won't name him because his family are there yet. We'll just call him Sean. And his luck was going against him. Constantly, he was coming out from the game of cards. 31 they play in that part of Ireland, and the pockets were empty. Now this was at a time when there wasn't much money, so it was empty pockets, very easy. But still in all, money had value at that time. So he was wondering, what will I do? What will I do? Because the obvious thing to do was give up the cards, but you know yourself, it isn't easy to give up cards when you have a mind for them. So someone advised him, look, Sean, they said, hey, there's one solution, very easy for that. Halloween, find the bush. He knew what that meant. The bush meant the briar, and a briar meant the two-rooted briar. And if you creep under a two-rooted briar at 12 o'clock on Halloween night, you can make a wish. And that wish is bound to come through. Now, there's only one problem with that. You might get more than you wish for. But desperation is a strange thing, and an awful thing. He decided he'd chance it. It was near Halloween, following month, and he found a two-rooted briar. They're not difficult to find because briars are like weeds. They're spread. You can almost see them growing. And they can grow and they can take root again. They're like a little tunnel. He found one that was big enough to crawl under, and he waited. And on Halloween night, midnight, he crawled under it. And when he came out the other side, what was there in front of him? A deck of cards. Well, anyway, he ran home with it, came in, brand new deck of cards. A very fine deck of cards compared with the old tattery decks that they used to play with in this house and that house. Because remember, there were poor times and they used to wear out every deck until you could hardly see the spots on them. Anyway, he opened it up. Nothing. Perfectly ordinary deck. Thank God, he says, this is great. And fine, I'll take this with me the next night I'm going. And the next night was to O'Connor's house, because remember, there were all house card games at that time, not in the pub, because people hadn't the money for drink. So we got anyway. He went into O'Connor's next Tuesday night, and sure, they were all delighted to see him coming, easy money. And when he pulled out the deck, it was a case of, geez, where do you get the price of that? But of course they were delighted to see it. Now they'd be able to see what they were playing with. And it was dealt out. Himself, he won the first game, and the second game, and every other game. And they were examining this. God bless it, they said, hey, what? But he was winning fair. They had no complaint. Huh? But he went home and with 2 pockets full of change. It was all coppers. They hadn't any silver or gold. And it was the same the next night in another house and another house. For a finish, people were avoiding him. And the word got back to the parish priest. And the parish priest sent for him. Come on, he says, I want that deck. The Devil's Prayer Book. Give me that. But he didn't go. Now that he knew that this was his way of making a bit of a living, he legged it to Tralee, and he did the same there. And from Tralee off to Limerick, where there was bigger pickings. You had professional people in Limerick, doctors and solicitors and the like, dentists and all that. And he claimed them too. And the word went out further to Dublin, where you had fellas, who smoked cigars, and they had clubs in Dublin, very exclusive fellas who had no value on this hick from the country. A fella from Kerry, from an old parish in Kerry, didn't even know the name of it. And when he came in with a Kerry accent, fellas, the jazz, a fella from the bog who was stealing cards and this kind of thing. I thought he'd be an easy fella to separate from his money. He separated them from their money. And after that, the big lads in Dublin, the Viceregal fella, he was invited into the Viceregal Lodge. In fact, he separated the Viceregal fella, the Viceroy, from a few guineas as well. He went to London, and from there, he was invited over to France. France, no doubt. And from France, he stayed. He was made a Chevalier of the Court in France, in Paris, no less. And he stayed there for the next 30 years, playing cards with that deck, and couldn't lose. He made friends of the gentry in Paris, a very far cry from the small village of Brosna. And I tell you this much, he set up in Paris a salon for himself. The fine ladies with their fans came in to see him. He married in Paris, one of those same fine ladies, but of course nothing lasts forever. At the end of 35 years, at last, he felt death coming on him. And I suppose he felt something else as well. Maybe he began to become a little bit uncomfortable with the deck. And he sent for this abbé to see him out of the world. And the priest said, when he heard about this deck I can't give you absolution and the last rites, he says, until you hand over the deck. Oh, I will, says Sean. I have no further use of it, because all his family were seen for now, and his wife, a noble woman. But there it is for you. And he was anointed. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. And he died. He died. But when the priest took out the deck out of its golden casket, because that's where it was now, and looked at it and examined it. One, the joker was first out, of course, like every deck has a joker. But two, another joker. And three, and four. Every single card in that deck, down to the 53rd one, was a joker. And each one smiling back to his ears, a grim smile. So you'd wonder, who was that joker? And what was that deck that was waiting for Sean at the other side of that bush on that Halloween night? And maybe the parish priest was right. Maybe it was the Devil's Prayer Book. So any gift that you get on Iha Hauna, maybe you'll be better off without it. The man who told me this story experienced it himself. Himself and his neighbours lived only 2 fields away from each other. And at that time, remember, Cuaid visiting at night was a most popular thing in Ireland. This was before television. Most people hadn't a radio. So what did you do at night? Stay inside looking at the 4 walls? Huh? No. You visited your neighbours, just to discuss the doings of the day, just to talk about anything at all. Keep company, just to pass the time, especially in the winter time. Because remember, the winters in Ireland are long, from October to March, and the old people like to talk anyway. Today, we've been turned into idiots by television. All we do today is, oh. Television can't talk to you. Older people talk to each other. People can talk. So this man told me he used to come across to his neighbour a couple of nights a week, and they'd call to see him, the same. Now, it was just Halloween night, he told me. That's why he remembered this particular one. And whatever he was thinking of, he says, I shouldn't have been out. But then he says, I wasn't afraid of the dark. And then it was just a couple of fields away. And I visited my 2 neighbours. They were older people. Their family was gone. They were living alone. And the way it was, if it was a wet night, I'd travel around by the road to save my boots from getting wet. If it was a dry night, I'd take the shortcut across the field, like most people would do. And if I took the shortcut, it would take me down beside the gable of their cowshed, into the yard and straight into their house. And that's the way this night was. I arrived at their house anyway, went in and we chatted away about this, that and the other thing. Nothing in particular. But it came to about 11 o'clock and I said, I'll be going. And the man of the house said to me, don't, he said, stay for a while. Oh God, I said, I must go. I have to be up in the morning. Look, wait a half an hour, the man of the house said. Have another drop of tea. No, he said, I'm going. All right, says the man of the house, but you might be back. Oh, I'll be back tomorrow night maybe. And he went, opened the door, and off he went. He went the way he came, by the gable of the cowshed, and he was just at the gable of the shed when he had this noise. He had the shouting and the cheering, and he had the pucking of the ball like a game of hurling going on. Now, at 11:15 at night, what kind of a game would be going on in the name of God? So he paused, he stopped. And then he started again. God, he says, I must see this. What's going on here? And he took a couple of steps forward. Big man. And if he did, there was a hand laid on his chest and he was pushed back. Now, it took him by surprise and he stumbled back. But first he got his balance and he started off again. No, he wasn't frightened. He was more startled. But he started off again, and if he did, there was the hand again on his chest. There was nothing there, nothing that he could see. It was a bright night. But the shouting and the cheering was still going on out there. There was a little hill there, but he could see nothing. So he decided he'd go back. He went back across the yard, back to the door of the house and into the kitchen. And there was the old man and the old woman of the house sitting by the fireplace, just like this, one on each side, and the old man smiled. He says, you came back? He came in the door, shut it behind him, and sat down. Not a word out of him. And the man of the house said to his wife, make a cup of tea for him. Make a cup of tea. And she did. The old kettle would always be hanging over the fire at that time, the old black kettles. She made a cup of tea anyway for him. And the man of the house said to him, listen now to me, he said. They'd be there every so often playing their game. And they don't like witnesses. They don't like any interruptions. So drink your tea, and wait until they're finished. And he did. There was pure quietness now in the kitchen. And after about a half an hour, the man of the house, he looked at the clock and he said, no, he said, you can go. And he stood up and he went out. And he said to me, look, he said, I was in two minds, he says, which way would I go, by the road around, or the shortcut the same way again. But he said, I went that way, out by the cowshed. I took the same way again, because he said, if I didn't, I'd never go that way again. And I went. Nothing. Their game must be over. They must have finished their game. And of course, who was it? Only the fairies. They were playing their game there and they didn't want any witnesses. He went home, it was fine. He didn't see them. They didn't feel anything there. But he was not going to pass while they were playing their game. And that was that.